the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
from the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
All right, strap yourselves in, folks, because today we're diving headfirst into some seriously charpy water.
Ooh, this is going to be good.
We're talking criticisms of President Biden's time in office.
Ooh, yeah.
We're going to be tackling some controversial stuff, no doubt about it.
Definitely.
But don't worry, we're here to break it all down.
That's right. We'll guide you through it all.
And unpack those dissenting viewpoints we might not hear every day.
Exactly, because we think it's important to understand those different perspectives. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that.
When you only hear one side of the story, it's hard to really form a balanced opinion.
Exactly. And today we're using Samuel Carter's The Case Against Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. as our compass.
Now, before we dive in, let's be super clear about something.
Yeah, super important point.
We are not here to tell you whether these criticisms are right or wrong.
Definitely not.
We're just laying them all out on the table for you.
Yep. Think of us as like unbiased reporters, just presenting the information.
Exactly, so you can form your own conclusions.
Okay, ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Let's start with the economy, something that affects every single one of us.
Hits close to home, right?
Carter compares the economy under Biden to a roller coaster.
Yeah, that's a pretty vivid image.
And he links it directly to the COVID stimulus packages.
Right, he suggests that while those stimulus measures were meant to stabilize things,
kind of get us back on track.
yeah, he argues that they might have actually had unintended consequences.
Like what kind of consequences?
Well, think about it. Injecting a massive amount of money into the economy
Right.
without a corresponding increase in goods and services
Sure.
can lead to, you guessed it,
Inflation.
bingo. And that's exactly what he argues happened under Biden.
So it's not just about the stimulus itself, but also the speed and scale of it.
Exactly. Too much too fast, maybe.
I mean, it's something we're all feeling, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Prices are going up everywhere, at the grocery store, at the gas pump.
It's hard to ignore.
Have you noticed it too?
Oh, yeah, big time. And the source is pretty critical of how the Biden administration has handled these supply chain issues.
Ah, the supply chain, another big piece of the puzzle.
Huge. He basically says they were too little, too late with their response.
Oh, that's harsh.
It is, but we have to remember there were global factors at play too.
Right, things outside of Biden's control.
Exactly. So there's a lot of debate about where the blame really lies.
Okay, so that's the economic picture.
One piece of the puzzle.
Now let's shift gears and talk about something a little more personal.
Ooh, getting personal.
President Biden's age and health.
This has been a hot topic.
Has it ever, Carter really zeroes in on Biden's age?
He doesn't shy away from it.
And how it's been under such intense public scrutiny.
Every little slip up, every stumble.
Magnified under a microscope.
And he suggests that those highly publicized gaffes,
Those moments where he seems to,
forget things or get confused,
yeah, those moments.
have fueled concerns about whether he's really up to the demands of the presidency.
I mean, we've all had those senior moments, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
But when you're the leader of the free world, the stakes are a lot higher.
No doubt about it. And the source questions the White House's transparency regarding Biden's health.
Ah, the transparency issue.
Yeah, he argues that the public deserves a clear and honest picture of the president's well-being.
Especially when it comes to national security.
Absolutely. It's a tricky balance, though, right?
Super tricky.
The right to privacy versus the public's right to know.
Classic dilemma.
Especially when we're talking about the person holding the highest office in the country.
Okay, so we've talked about the economy and concerns about Biden's health.
Two big issues.
Now let's head south, literally.
Road trip.
And talk about the border.
Circle up.
The source doesn't mince words here, talking about a flood of illegal immigrants and a full-blown crisis.
Strong language for sure.
And the core argument is that Biden's reversal of certain Trump-era immigration policies
Ah, yes, the policy shifts
led to a surge in border crossings.
and put a strain on border communities and resources.
It's a complex issue, no doubt.
Definitely, with no easy answers.
But wouldn't some argue that those Trump-era policies were inhumane?
Oh, absolutely. There are strong feelings on both sides.
And that a more compassionate approach is needed?
A valid point, for sure.
What does the source say about that perspective?
Well, it acknowledges those humanitarian concerns.
Okay.
But ultimately, it argues that Biden's approach has led to a loss of control at the border.
Loss of control, that's a strong statement.
It is. And he suggests that it's made the situation worse for everyone involved.
For the migrants and for border communities.
Exactly, a lose-lose situation.
So it's about finding that balance between compassion and security.
Always a tough balance to strike.
And the source argues that the Biden administration has missed the mark.
That's his take on it.
Okay, so that's the border situation in a nutshell.
One of many complex issues.
Now, let's talk about a concept that plays a big role in this source's critique.
Hit me with it.
Lawfare.
Ooh, lawfare. Now that's an interesting one.
It is. So what exactly is lawfare?
Well, it's basically using lawsuits and legal challenges.
As a political weapon.
Exactly, to obstruct or undermine your opponents.
And the source argues that this tactic has been used effectively against Biden.
Oh, very effectively. It's been a major roadblock.
And has hindered his ability to govern.
A constant source of frustration, I imagine.
So how has this lawfare actually played out? Can you give us some concrete examples?
Absolutely. One of the most prominent examples is the fight over Biden's vaccine mandates.
Ah, the vaccine mandates. A lot of controversy there.
A ton. His administration tried to implement vaccine requirements for federal employees, healthcare workers, you name it.
A big push for vaccination.
Huge. And those mandates were met with immediate legal challenges.
Lawsuits galore.
And some of them were actually blocked or overturned in court.
So the legal battles tied things up in knots.
Exactly. And effectively stalled or even derailed a key part of Biden's agenda.
Wow, that's a pretty big deal.
It is. And the source claims this pattern has repeated itself in other areas too.
Like where?
Environmental regulations, immigration policy, you name it.
So a constant mirage of lawsuits.
A legal minefield.
Creating certainty and making it hard for the administration to move forward.
A real headache for Biden, I'm sure.
Okay, now let's talk about Biden's use of executive orders.
Oh yeah, this is a big one.
The source criticizes him for relying too heavily on this presidential power.
But haven't presidents always used executive orders?
They have. It's a tool in their toolbox.
So what's the problem here?
Well, the source argued that Biden has taken it to a whole new level.
Like how?
He's using executive orders to enact sweeping policy changes.
Changes that should really be debated and voted on by Congress.
Exactly. So it's bypassing the legislative process.
Cutting corners, so to speak.
And concentrating too much power in the executive branch.
Which raises concerns about checks and balances.
That's a big one, the separation of powers.
A cornerstone of our democracy.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have few.
Economic worries, concerns about Biden's age and health.
The border, lawfare, executive orders.
It's clear that this source is offering a pretty critical view of the Biden presidency.
It's definitely not a glowing review.
But remember, this is just one perspective.
One side of the story.
And it's important to hear all sides.
Absolutely, to get the full picture.
And to think critically about the information we're given.
Exactly. That's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive.
So stay tuned, because in part 2, we're going to continue unpacking these criticisms.
We'll dive into even more specific examples.
And examine the evidence presented.
Get ready for another deep dive.
It's going to be fascinating.
Can't wait. Welcome back, folks, for part 2 of our deep dive into the criticisms surrounding President Biden.
All right, let's unpack some of those criticisms a little further.
You bet.
You mentioned Biden's COVID stimulus packages being blamed for inflation.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? Like, drawing directly from the source, what specific arguments does Carter make?
Sure thing. So Carter argues that the size of those stimulus packages,
huge, right?
Massive, and that combined with continued government spending, essentially flooded the economy with money.
Too much money, too fast.
Exactly. He says it created a classic case of too much money chasing too few goods.
Ah, supply and demand. That brings back Econ 101 memories.
Basically, demand outstrips supply and, well, you know what happens then?
Prices go up.
Inflation, right. And that's exactly what Carter argues happened under Biden.
Interesting. But wouldn't some economists say that stimulus was necessary to prevent a deeper recession?
Oh, absolutely. That's a valid point. And Carter acknowledges that.
Okay.
He says the stimulus likely did prevent a worse downturn in the short term.
Right.
But he contends that the long-term consequences, particularly inflation, weren't fully considered.
So short-term gain, long-term pain.
That's kind of his argument. He specifically points to the Federal Reserve's policies, too.
Oh, the Fed, what did they do?
Keeping interest rates low and buying up assets.
Which, according to Carter,
further fueled the inflation fire.
So it's a multi-pronged critique.
Exactly. A combination of factors at play.
Okay, let's move on to immigration now.
Another hot-button issue.
Carter doesn't hold back. He calls it a flood of illegal immigrants.
Strong words.
What evidence does he present to back up this claim?
Well, he points to a big increase in the number of apprehensions at the border since Biden took office.
Okay, so more people being caught trying to cross.
Exactly. And he directly links this surge to the administration's reversal of certain Trump-era immigration policies.
Like what specifically?
Well, one of the key ones is the end of the Remain in Mexico policy.
Right. That one required asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their cases were processed in the U.S.
Exactly. And Carter believes that scrapping this policy sent a signal.
Like an open invitation.
Kind of a signal that the U.S. border was more open, which encouraged more people to try and cross illegally.
So he's saying that rolling back this policy basically backfired.
That's his argument. He also points to the decision to halt construction of the border wall.
Ah, the wall, another controversial issue.
Very much so. And Carter sees it as another example of weakening border security.
Making it easier for people to enter illegally.
That's the gist of it.
But what about the argument that those Trump-era policies were cruel and inhumane?
That's a valid point, and Carter acknowledges those concerns.
Okay.
But he argues that Biden's approach has created chaos and just isn't sustainable.
Chaos at the border, that doesn't sound good.
It's not. He paints a picture of overwhelmed Border Patrol agents, overcrowded facilities, a system that's just bursting at the seams.
So good intentions, but bad execution.
That's how Carter sees it. He basically says the Biden administration focused on undoing Trump's policies without a clear plan for what came next.
Leading to more problems down the line.
Exactly, making a tough situation even tougher.
Okay, let's dig into another area where Carter criticizes Biden, his use of executive orders.
Oh yeah, the executive pen.
He says Biden has overused this presidential power to bypass Congress.
A bit too trigger happy, huh?
That's the idea. Can you give us some specific examples of executive orders Carter finds problematic?
Absolutely. The one that really stands out is the executive order on vaccine mandates.
Ah, the mandates. Remember those.
Hard to forget, the ones that would have required vaccines for federal employees, healthcare workers, even employees at large businesses.
A sweeping mandate.
It was. And Carter saw it as a blatant overreach of presidential power.
He didn't like that one bit.
Not at all, especially since it was eventually blocked by the Supreme Court.
Oh, right, the court stepped in.
They did, and Carter argues that major policy decisions, like vaccine mandates,
should be handled by
Congress, not imposed by the
a
president.
matter for the legislature, not the executive branch.
Exactly. He sees it as sidestepping the democratic process.
And giving the president too much power.
Concentrating power in the wrong hand.
Are there any other executive orders Carter takes issue with?
Oh yeah, a few. He also criticizes Biden's executive orders on climate change and gun control.
So, issues where Biden took action without going through Congress.
Exactly. And Carter, while acknowledging that the intentions might be good,
Right, trying to address important problems.
he argues that these orders go beyond what the president is constitutionally allowed to do.
Overstepping boundaries.
That's how Carter views it, basically pushing a progressive agenda without the consent of Congress.
Interesting. So it seems like Carter is arguing for a more limited view of presidential power.
Absolutely. He wants to see Congress playing a more active role in shaping policy.
Okay, makes sense. Now let's move on to a topic that stirred up a lot of controversy. Biden's presidential pardons.
Ooh, pardons. Always a touchy subject.
What's Carter's beef with the pardons?
Well, he takes issue with several of them.
Multiple pardons he doesn't like.
Yeah, he argues that they show a lack of respect for the seriousness of the crimes committed.
So letting people off too easily.
That's the idea. He thinks it underlines faith in the justice system.
I can see how that could be a concern.
It is. And he specifically highlights pardons granted for things like drug trafficking, bribery, even manslaughter.
Wow, serious offenses.
No kidding. And Carter believes that the pardon power should be used sparingly.
Only in exceptional cases?
Exactly, like when there's been a clear miscarriage of justice or strong humanitarian reasons.
And he doesn't think Biden's pardons meet that standard.
Nope, he argues that they suggest Biden is prioritizing political considerations over justice.
Putting politics ahead of accountability.
That's how Carter interprets it.
It's a tough balance, isn't it?
It is. The president has the power to pardon, but how they use it can send a powerful message.
Absolutely, and Carter believes that in these cases, Biden has eroded public trust.
And sent the wrong message about how justice works in America.
A lot to think about here.
Definitely, we've covered a lot of ground today exploring some pretty serious criticisms of Biden.
And we're not done yet.
Nope. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll continue to dig into these criticisms.
And examine their broader implications.
It's going to be a wild ride.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Samuel Carter's critique of President Biden.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We've explored economic anxiety,
Concerns about Biden's age and his fitness to lead,
that heated immigration debate,
how legal challenges and those executive orders have really shaped things.
and let's not forget those controversial presidential pardons.
Definitely sparked some debate there.
But now that we've laid out all these individual criticisms, I'm wondering about the bigger picture.
Yeah, what's the takeaway? What does it all mean?
What does it all add up to?
That's the million-dollar question. And what's interesting is that while Carter goes after Biden pretty hard,
Yeah, he doesn't pull any punches.
he also touches on themes that go way beyond just this one presidency.
Okay, I like that. So it's not just about Biden. It's about something bigger.
Exactly. He's raising fundamental questions about how our country is run.
Like what kind of questions? Give me an example.
Okay, take the criticisms of Biden's economic policies.
The inflation, the gas prices, all that.
Yeah, on the surface, it's about those specific issues, right?
But you're saying there's something deeper there.
I think so. It taps into a deeper anxiety a lot of Americans feel about their financial security.
The rising cost of living, just making ends meet.
It makes us question if our leaders really get it,
If they understand what we're going through.
if they can actually handle these complex economic problems.
It's like a disconnect between the people in charge and the people they're supposed to be serving.
That's a good way to put it, and I think that feeling goes beyond just economics.
Right. It's like a broader disillusionment with the political system.
Exactly, a feeling that those in power are out of touch with everyday Americans.
And that's not unique to Biden, is it?
Not at all. We've seen this distrust of institutions and politicians growing for years.
Across the political spectrum.
Exactly. It's not a left or right thing. It's a widespread sentiment.
Okay, so we've got this underlying sense of disillusionment, and then you add in the concerns about Biden's age and health.
Yeah, his stamina, his mental sharpness, his ability to do the job.
And it raises questions about what we really value in a leader.
Especially in a world that feels increasingly chaotic and unpredictable.
Like, what kind of experience and temperament do we need in the driver's seat?
That's the question, right? Do we need a steady hand or someone with a bolder vision?
It's a tough call. And then you throw in the criticisms of those executive orders, the immigration stuff, the pardons.
It all adds up to a debate about the balance of power.
Who gets to decide what?
The role of the courts, the effectiveness of our institutions.
It really makes you question whether our systems are up to the task.
Yeah, can our government actually solve these complex problems?
Are we just stuck in partisan gridlock?
Are our institutions failing to keep up with a rapidly changing world?
These are huge questions, and they go way beyond any one president or political party.
It's about the future of our country, really.
So, given all these criticisms, what do you think the biggest challenges are for the Biden administration moving forward?
I think one of the biggest challenges for Biden is rebuilding trust.
Trust in government, trust in institutions.
Yeah, and bridging that deep divide in our country.
Can he unify a nation that feels increasingly fractured?
Can he address those economic anxieties and social tensions that are driving us apart?
It's a tall order, no doubt about it.
It is, but it brings us back to why we're having this conversation in the first place.
To the importance of hearing different viewpoints, even the ones we disagree with.
Even the ones that make us uncomfortable.
Because whether we like it or not, these criticisms force us to confront some hard truths.
They challenge our assumptions, make us think critically about what's going on.
And hopefully have a more productive dialogue about the future of our country.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, dear listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring this topic.
Don't just take our word for it. Go out there and do your own research.
Read articles, listen to podcasts, heck, even check out Carter's book if you're feeling ambitious.
Form your own opinions, talk to people who have different views.
Because at the end of the day, a healthy democracy depends on informed and engaged citizens.
Citizens who are willing to grapple with these tough issues and have those difficult conversations.
So keep those brains buzzing and keep that critical thinking going.
We'll catch you on our next deep dive.
Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground. For freedom, for tradition, in this land we found.